What we're doing here is we're talking about finished construction today. Uh, Finished construction is really in you guys' wheelhouse. This is this is what interiors is mostly about, at least in the sense of all the studio training that you've done. And so we're going to go through this information, and it may help to form some sort of context. Why are you doing this? What are you doing? You know, how is this working for you, and all sorts of different things, because we have purpose in the real world for why we do this. And so let's start with that. Basically, the underlying construction isn't very attractive. We're not really excited about seeing a lot of the things that the building needs to stand up and operate and all those other things. So as a result, you know, we're concerned about how we hide the base construction. We want to know what kind of appearance qualities we're going to be able to achieve with the project, and then there's performance aspects of the space, and those are affected by finishes, as well as the idea of making some sort of statement and having a statement or some sort of general comment about your goals in the project. So these are some things that happen, especially for interior designers in these finished documents. So let's kind of understand that what we're really talking about here is superficial treatments. These are surface treatments. There's a whole variety of applications by their specific use and categories, and so we need to have an expanded knowledge and understanding of what those are. We also need to understand what we're attaching these materials to. We need to understand if they are appropriate and will form a good permanent construction assembly as a result. Now, there's also thinking about how products can be compatible, and what limitations might be attributable to certain types of finishes. And then your clients, for the most part, are probably going to be pretty concerned about what kind of rigor you're applying to your design application in terms of longevity. It would be unfortunate to have a finish fail after just a short time. So as a result, these are things that designers need to consider, especially as they're working on their designs and their documents for design. So these finish applications have some very basic characteristics. You know, of course, the easy one, the low-hanging fruit here, is the appearance, and these are primarily what we expect the look to be when we get done. But underlying that, there are needs for the finishes to make sense from a life cycle standpoint and from a maintenance standpoint. Are these products, are they appropriate for the types of spaces and the types of uses that are needed? Also, how do code limitations, flame spread, moisture reaction, there's all sorts of elements in the codes that limit what kind of application we can apply these finishes for. And then just general performance. Are these appropriate finishes for the type of space, and are they performing the way our clients like them? So as we consider this, we start to think about, the specific design applications. Now I'm going to share a little story with you. Many years ago, when I was working, when we were designing Whittier Law School, we had completed the design work, and we were pretty much in the battle of putting these contract documents together. And we had kind of come to a point where we needed to review the information with the client. So we scheduled a meeting with the dean of the law school, and we were going through it, and I could start to tell that we were kind of speaking a bit over his head, and he was getting a little bit starting to get a little bit complacent about his responses, he kind of interrupted me and he said, John, I just got back from touring Tulane University's new law school. And he said, I was there and I was listening in on one of the lectures, and what I observed was that the rooms required amplification. They needed a sound system for them to work within the lecture rooms. And he said, that was a real shame. And he said, well, what are you doing about it, Secor? And I said, well, I have an acoustic engineer that we've hired, and we have room acoustics, we think, under control and this and that. And he said, good, because I just need to tell you that if the acoustics don't work, you will have failed this project. And he had a very serious look at his face. And I have to tell you, that's how your clients are concerned about what you're doing and how you're doing it. So we took very seriously that concern. The project worked out great, but I offer that as a way of understanding that it's not just how it looks, it's how it works. And so in the particular case of the law school, they were concerned about the debate, the exchange of ideas that happens in a law school classroom, where not only is it an exchange between the professor and the students, but the students and the students both are engaged in conversations that are kind of managed by the instructor. So these are all things that just kind of bring up as a little bit of a sense of things. So think about the function. The codes will come in. Usually we have a little thing called plan check that helps us understand what those codes are about, and so we pay attention to those as the occasion arises. All right, so design features, I'm just going to kind of say, if you haven't figured out what design features are about, you should go back to your design studios. These are all things that you should pay attention to. The idea of the form, the scale, the heights, all those physical characteristics, I think you've been introduced to and you're working through now in the various lab classes. So there are some other design features that may be more subtle. Of course, we understand the visual. And as I mentioned, there's an acoustic aspect of what we do. There's a tactile sense, what does it feel like? And then there's an olfactoral consideration. Now, I got to share with you another little quick story that the first year, it was about 10 years ago, I came into the new design studio over there where we hold classes now, and I walked in the door and it was an overwhelming smell of rubber and vinyl. And I think you can still get a little bit of a remnant of it when you go into the hallways now. But the point is, that doesn't show up in any catalog. It doesn't show up on any brochure. No one says, beautiful material, but it stinks. Understand all aspects of your products, because there are many characteristics to them. And so, think about some of that as you're specifying different materials. All right, so other aspects would have to do with the size, the weight, and the installation requirements. We're starting to drill into more technical considerations. And I have to tell you that they can be considerable. I did a project we actually won an award on up in Los Angeles, and our designer, who's no longer here, but who was a very good designer, decided to place stonework at about 10 feet in the air. And I had to confer with many technical professionals on the best way to do that. And even after specifying in a very rigorous way, what we needed, because after all, we don't want stones falling on people during an earthquake. So the idea on it was that, we put in a pretty robust set of details so that the material would hold in place under, a whole variety of circumstances. That the very first thing the contractor did is come in and ask for a substitution. And at that point, knowing all the work that we had done to specify, we were quite able and confident in rejecting the substitution. So, these are some things that happen that might be worth thinking about. All right, so other design, those practical requirements, cost. Some clients are worried about how things cost. Durability, adaptability, maintainability, all those things. Our clients tend to be facility professionals. These are guys and women who are basically in charge of maintaining the facility for the organization. And the finishes that require a lot of upkeep, they really are pretty down on those. So it's good to know what your client threshold of pain is in that regard, because it may be something that needs to be taken into consideration. And then we got this whole design statement thing. By the way, I tried to find just some weird pictures here, so please forgive my added graphic pieces here. But I'm not so certain that some designers might find this a perfectly acceptable thing. So it's all a subject of what you believe about your design. So one of the things I wanted to say, when you enter into the realm of specialty materials, you should be very cautious. Client or product reps promise the world, but their technical department may not back the assurances that you're getting from the salesperson. So understand that your client is still looking to you to be the design professional, and as such, I would say go cautiously with specialty materials. Be very thoughtful about them, because specialty materials often require specialty applications, meaning how do you install them, how do you maintain them, and a whole variety of other things. So in your design statement, you might want to keep that in mind as you move forward through the process. Okay, so let's talk about types of finishes. By the way, I'm trying to keep an eye on the time here. We've been at this for just a bit, and I was thinking that we might give it about 5 or 10 minutes and then take a little bit of a break in case someone wants to get something to eat or whatever they need. That way, this material is not overly lengthy in time. So let me start by saying, there's lots of types of finishes. These are the basic finishes that we deal with on every project. Some to a larger degree than others, but there's just a listing. In that design statement, there is some risk. And so one of the ideas of coming up with a design statement is so that you can always go back to the type of project you were really intending. The other thing is, as these become contract documents, they become part of a contract. And so as a result, having some simplified statement about what your goals are important. There are practical concerns over design. So sometimes you need to balance those in how you're working through that part of the process. One of the risks is that the material is misapplied. Top photo shows a gentleman in full slippage. That's a huge liability for designers, and especially if it's an expensive finish, like a nice marble floor or something that looks really attractive, but is actually super slippery when it gets wet. So these are things that you want to look at also. Poor performance might include wear, might include the idea that, as I mentioned, it's that you selected all hard surfaces, and now I have an echo chamber in my lobby. So these are things that, again, things to consider. Cost, application, the environmental considerations are very important. So all these things are coming about as a way of the designer being the lead specifier in this process. So with that, I'll move to the next topic. All right, so there is a sequence for putting together construction drawings, and you know, I think we're going to be done in time. We may be able to skip our schedule or a scheduled break. All right, so this sequence of construction generally starts with the confirmation of materials. There are, in the process of construction, a specific protocol for confirmation of materials, and that comes through what they call sample submittals. And typically what happens is the contractor is required by the contract documents to submit to the designer an actual piece of the material. Not a photograph, not a digital representation, but the stuff. Okay, the real stuff. Now, I will tell you that in big stuff, on big projects, we will call for what we call a mock-up. So they have to construct a wall, and they have to take this material and apply it in exactly the way it goes onto the wall so that we can see what the finished installation looks like before they spend a gazillion dollars on the material. So that's just a request that it's not a request, it's a directive put in your contract documents saying, we've got a specialty wall made of this kind of stone. I need a 4-foot by 8-foot wall section built. Now understand, it's going to cost money and the contractor is going to complain, but all you have to do is say, hey, do you really want to learn on a one-out only type of effort, or do you want to see what it looks like and make maybe some grout joint adjustments or something like that before we actually get into the full production? So that's kind of an important piece. One of the big pushbacks that comes is in the form of product availability. This is a challenge that all designers have, in that the design materials that you select today may not be available a year from now when the project's under construction. So that could be a real difficulty. So as you're researching materials, you want to find out, is this a mainstay product? Is this a product that you've made for a long time and plan to make for a long time in the future? Because you don't want to go back to the client. Listen, this is the hardest thing you're going to do, is get that dang client to approve your finishes. You can make all the presentations you want, but they're going to want to see what the price is and all those other things. By the time they get down to an actual contract with the contractor, that product may be gone. So that's something you need to be thoughtful about. Acquisition. There are some methods of acquisition in which the owner says, I don't want the contractor buying that and installing it. I get a discount. I'm going to do it myself. So it's called owner supplied contractor installed materials. I'm going to take a drink of water here just a second. Ooh, sorry. Anyway, okay. So as a result, how these products are acquired may have something to do with the liability of the product coming at the right time, in the right condition, and all those other things. So the owner needs to know, if they're going to acquire it, they take a certain measure of risk in the process. If it's provided by the contractor, then it's protected by the contract documents. So there's just some things to think about. All right, so construction prep and layout. The product, in some cases, needs to be considered for where exactly it goes. I mean, very specifically. And so those discussions need to happen in the field during the construction process. And So where the face of finish occurs is not just a left or right or up or down issue. What it means is that the material may be thick or thin. If it's a natural material, it may have a variation in it. And what if it's supposed to transition to a flat wood floor? You may have to come up with some transition device like maybe a lintel or a threshold that helps make those transitions. But either case, placement is not just up and down, but it's also how far off the surface something occurs. So those material transitions can be very challenging. Do you provide a separation device like a Sluter strip, which is a metal strip at tile that allows for the tile to stop at a separate material before it gets picked up by say wood? These are all things that are part of our contract documents that we need to be very specific on. And then the elevations, and by that I mean the idea that some materials transition full height to the ceiling, and some only occur at lower elevations. This may occur a lot in the washrooms or in the kitchen, commercial kitchen areas, or any variety of other locations. But knowing and stating how high a material is installed is a pretty important piece. We're also concerned about how we're going to apply it. Is the material appropriate? Hopefully, you've specified everything. Oh, I think you have to hit the mute. You have to hit the mute.
I hit the mute.
Sorry. You got it. Just a minute. All right, okay. So I think we're good. Sorry about that. Nope.
I can hear you.
Okay. I'm hearing myself here through that. Sorry about that. Okay, just a technical difficulty there. I'm going to keep going here. Okay. Why don't you go ahead and step back a bit? Yes.
It's
sorry, guys.
Yourself on there?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys. There's always a technical glitch. Wave at me if you can hear me now. Awesome. Okay, good. All right. So, moving on through this stuff, hopefully you've made the correct specification for the substrate, so all that's been confirmed and applied properly. The other aspect of this is that some materials, like wood, require acclimation. That means that they must be delivered to the job site between 24 and 72 hours before installation. The reason is that the wood will acclimate, will swell, or will contract based upon the environment that it's placed in. So you don't want to get it, install it, and have it buckle because it's expanded when it shouldn't have. All right, so all those installation pieces are important. Let me share with you. The finishes tend to be per square foot the highest cost of construction in a project. If the installation isn't correct, the owner is really going to be unhappy. And so spending the extra time really does make a difference. Okay, so then after we've gotten the product installed, we want to protect it. And part of that includes, you know, when does it go in the schedule of construction? What kind of barriers are you going to put on it? And then what are the final sealants required for the material? Okay, so in these drawings, our goals are to try to be very specific about where the finishes go. We want to make sure that we identify the transitions that are required between product A and product B, and that we give direction to other documents. And you're going to find this to be true next week and the following week and the week after that, because that's what we're going to be spending time on. So as a result, we're going to go through this quick sequence, and then we'll, kind of pick it up and take a break in about 5 minutes. All right. So as we're creating this stuff, we want to understand what's going on. What was the program information, just as we've done before. We want to understand how that is affected by the schematic design and the space plan from the senior designer. We want to understand if there's specialty areas of work or specialty areas of circulation that need to have the finish fit around or work around. So knowing the furniture placement is often very helpful. Then we want to refer to the drawing symbols that are in our standard package of graphic representations. Now I'm going to take just a minute. Well, I'm going to go down the road here, and we'll talk about the what these symbols mean in more detail. So we're going to try to identify these symbols in the sense of flooring, transition alignments and intersections. So I'm going to use my cursor here and see if it actually works. There, hey, look at that. All right. So looking at, say, the floor finish, what we do is we have a delineation. You're going to see this extended wide hexagon. And the hexagon is going to have an F and a hyphen and a number and a slash and another number. So, and you'll see how all this works in just a bit. So F is for F is for floor, B is for base, W is for wall, C is for ceiling, T is for trim, and then that second type of finish, or that second finish type, is listed here. And then you see a symbol for how we call out transitions, meaning stop the carpet here, bring the tile in from this side. Okay, so we mark that on a plan. So these finish types here are attributable to this. So for example, if we had a floor type that had tile, we would come down and we might put an F1 because it's a dowel tile, morning sunshine, I don't know. And that would be called out in the schedule. You'll see where that is in a minute. Actually, we'll do that in a couple of weeks. But then what you're going to see is that we come down here to number 5, and we'd see slip resistant. Yep, we don't want them dying with a broken back. So we're going to come up here and we're going to add an F1/5. See how that works? So we might be in a wall tile, and the slip resistance isn't important, but we still need to seal it. So we'd come over to a wall tile, and that might be a wall, a W3, and we'd include a /6 as being a clear finish on that wall. Okay, and you'll see how all this works just a little bit later, but I wanted to introduce it today. Additionally, certain surfaces need to get delineation on what exactly goes where. And so this is an opportunity to do that. This is just a listing of graphic symbols that help us to understand where one paint starts and where one paint finishes. You'll see this example in just a second. Okay, so one of the first things we want to pay attention to is if you're doing a floor pattern, you want to be thoughtful for what that pattern is. Now, this is rather random, okay? But sometimes you end up with a pattern that's rather, specific. Maybe it's a herringbone pattern or something like that. So we put that on the floor plan. And one of the things I want you to observe here is if you look at these lines, they're not very dark. And if they were dark, if they were at 100% opaqueness, then this would be a very confusing drawing to look at, because the intensity of lines would be overwhelming to look at, especially at an 1/8 inch. So we're gonna have some discussion about how we change that in the assignment. Okay, so now here's a room or set of rooms. This is a break room. This is an office, and this is an office, okay? So one of the things that we typically do is, we don't have to do it all over, but for this example, it works well, is we try to refer to typical. That means everywhere, unless we tell you not. Everywhere is a F4, everywhere. Everywhere is a B2 or base 2, everywhere, unless we say it's not. Okay, so as a result, this way we can tell people without doing it all over. So when you see the word tip, tip, UNO, which means typical, unless noted otherwise. So that means that if I don't have to write typical all over the place. I don't have to do this anywhere. All I have to say is, unless I tell you otherwise, this goes all over the place. Okay? All right. So based on that, we're going to have a floor finish. There's a floor. There's a floor. There's a floor. Okay. Then we have base. Oop, those are the B's right there. Then we have the walls, and we start to see some, wait, what's this stuff? So we see these dot patterns, and that says that wall goes from there to there. That's where that finish goes. See it? So we've got it called out. We'd say it starts at this corner and goes to this corner. Okay? Same thing over here. What's going on with this thing? So we're going to take that and we're going to bring it out around the corner, and look, it's got a different designation. All right, so we're going to call it out on a plan. We're going to do other things with it later, but for right now, this is the minimum we have to do. Okay, so we're going to call it the flooring, the base, the walls, the ceilings, and the trim. Okay, so I wanted you to see what we're doing here. Now, I'm going to also share with you that these could get rather complicated in a very complicated design, but your assignment today is very simple. So don't get too hung up on some of this stuff. It's pretty basic. Okay, so we want to reference all the flooring transitions. Look, there's my little transition that says this flooring goes to there, and then there's another flooring outside that. Okay, so we put this little kind of two pointy arrows pointing at each other. And then we have a line that shows where that transition occurs. Okay, so typically flooring transitions, not so much walls. Okay, so as I mentioned, here's the painting schedule. We will provide this on a finished plan, which you'll be doing in like, what, 5 weeks, 4 weeks? Yeah, the finished schedule? Yeah, something like that. Anyway, so it's just conferring our schedule. So we want to provide details if there are specialty details that have to do with transitions, with types of materials going somewhere. You're not going to have so much on this stuff on our assignments, but understand this is where we put it. We put them in the finished plan. Then we also provide some additional notation so that people understand or the contractor understands what we're trying to achieve. Oh my God, that was a long time. Okay.